Turning to developing campaign news tonight, Republican gubernatorial candidate Bob Stefanowski accusing the governor of a cover-up. It's all over a moment in Tuesday's debate and a question about gender ID being taught in schools. The governor firing back too. Take a listen to what both sides are now saying tonight.
In a lightning round, when asked if sex education in schools should include instruction about gender identity, the candidates responded,
"Not in kindergarten, not in grammar school. Later in school, yes."
Governor Lamont.
It doesn't and it shouldn't.
But this moment from Tuesday's debate now stirring up controversy. Republican gubernatorial candidate Bob Stefanowski now making two claims. One, he says there was a cover-up from the state, telling us a national education watchdog group says the state's Department of Education website went down 2 hours after the governor made that comment.
And when the education website came back up, the language was changed. So here you essentially have a branch of the state government trying to cover up.
The governor's chief of staff firing back, telling us, quote, "These claims are deceitful, unfounded, and cynical, meant solely to score cheap political points." It continued. Governor Lamont would never use his office and administration for political gain, and these falsehoods are an insult to the character and integrity of our public servants. We spoke with the spokesperson for the Department of Education, who says the changes to the Health and Balanced Living Curriculum framework came in May of this year, and this framework not mandated. Those decisions are left to local school districts. Stefanowski's second claim is that the governor lied to voters.
He said that he doesn't advocate teaching gender ID in grammar school, and he does. And he should explain why he lied in the debate.
Lamont's campaign sent this statement tonight saying, quote, "The governor agrees with current administration policy, which is sexual education and gender identity education at appropriate ages, which is not mandated and allows for parents to opt students out of by contacting their local districts."